Into the Lifeboat from Titanic Survivor, memoir by Violet Jessup. You could almost imagine this a scene of busily curious people with not very much to do. True, there were officers and men briskly getting lifeboats ready to lower, their tense faces strangely in contrast to the well-ordered groups wandering about. I felt chilly without a coat, so I went down again for something to cover my shoulders and picked up a silk eiderdown from the first open cabin I came to. How strange it was to pass all those rooms lit up so brilliantly, their doors open and contents lying around in disorder. Jewels sparkled on dressing tables, and a pair of silver slippers were lying just where they had been kicked off. I gathered my eiderdown and went up. On my way, I passed a group of officers still in their mess jackets, hands in pockets, chatting quietly on the companion square, as men do who are waiting for something. They smiled at me, and I waved back. As I turned, I ran into Jock, the band leader and his crowd with their instruments. Funny, they must be going to play, thought I, and at this late hour. Jock smiled in passing, looking rather pale for him, remarking, "Just going to give them a tune to cheer things up a bit," and passed on. Presently the strains of the band reached me faintly as I stood on deck watching a young woman excitedly remonstrating with an embarrassed young officer. He wanted her to get into the lifeboat he was trying to fill, but she refused to go without her father. "He must wait," responded the officer, "till the decks are cleared of women and children." Out on deck, the first argument started over who would and who wouldn't go into the boats, which appeared to be suspended miles above the yawning blackness below. Nobody was anxious to move. Titanic seemed so steady. To justify their reluctance, some pointed to a light on the horizon, another ship's lights. People were reassured, content to bide their time. One boat was already being lowered with very few people in it. When this was pointed out as a shining example for backward souls by the officer near me, he got a rather alarming response as the crowd surged forward to embark. The boat was lowered very full, almost too full this time, and so on. Always some held back in need of coaxing, while a few were too eager. A steward stood waiting with his back to the bulkhead, hands in his pockets. It struck me forcibly as the first time I had ever seen a steward stand thus, amid a group of distinguished guests. A woman standing near me gave an approving glance as John Jacob Astor handed his wife into a boat, waving encouragingly to her as he stepped back into an ever-increasing crowd of men. Anne Turnbull, still silent and unmoved, dragged a little behind me. I suggested we keep together, and we stood a while to watch. There was nothing else we could do. Dimly, I heard a shot. Glancing forward, I caught my breath as a white rocket shot up, then another. Distress rockets. They went very high with great noise. The lights on the horizon seemed to come nearer. That cheered up the group about us, who had slowly started to fill a boat. Young officers urged them to greater speed, showing unlimited patience, I thought. Another rocket went up into the night. A few women near me started to cry loudly when they realized a parting had to take place, their husbands standing silently by. They were Poles and could not understand a word of English. Surely a terrible plight to be among a crowd in such a situation and not be able to understand anything that is being said. Boats were now being lowered more rapidly, and a crowd of foreigners was brought up by a steward from the third class. They dashed eagerly as one man over to a boat, almost more than the officer could control. But he regained order and managed to get the boat away. It descended slowly, uncertainly at first, now one end up and then the other. The falls were new and difficult to handle. Some men nearby were throwing things over the side, deck chairs, rafts, or any wooden thing lying nearby. Suddenly, the crowd of people beside me parted. A man dashed to the ship's side, and before anyone could stop him, hurled himself into the descending boat. There was a murmur of amazement and disapproval. I turned to say something to Anne. Looking along the length of the ship, I noticed the forward part of her was lower now, much lower. For a fraction of a second, my heart stood still, as is often the case when faith, hitherto unshaken faith, gets its first setback. One of the mailmen from our sorting office joined us. His work was finished, he remarked unemotionally. The mail is floating up to F deck with the water, he told us. I tried not to hear what he said, not wanting to believe what he accepted so stoically. Instead, I listened to the faint sounds of music from Jock's men. They were playing, Nearer My God to Thee.